Hey guys, thanks so much for coming back. I've got Michael Bann here with us today, and I'm really excited to talk about how I think his brain works, which I really have no understanding of it, if I'm being honest. But I want you guys to have a brief understanding into the world that he sees fitness and health and wellness in, because it's beautiful when you really start to peel back the onion layer. So I want to ask him the first question, which is, Michael, how do you help your people broadly?
I guess I just look at humans as like humans, right? They're not a system. We're not systems of systems, but we're these ever evolving creatures that constantly are changing based on the environment in which we're placed. So I look at the human, their environment, and totality of the person when I assess. And so like how I assess is probably the best way that I help my people. And my way of assessing is I guess very personalized and very individualized to the person. So I think that's probably the most simple way to answer that question.
If you were to say people changing, is that the same as evolving, like creatures evolve, or are you saying literally just day by day, experience by experience, there's just change, just broad change?
I think people just start transcending current states that they're in, and that changes how they view exercise and fitness, which then changes the response that their body gives to the exercise and fitness. So like think about it like this. Like if I told you, hey, you're gonna go do a 20 rep back squat right now, max effort. Like the emotional feel you have to that is like
It's devastating.
yeah. Whereas like if I told you to go like run or do like a 5K row, you being super aerobic, you'd be like, I can do that. Right? Whereas like me, you tell me to do a 5K row, I'm crying.
Yeah.
And you tell me to do a 20 rep back squat, I'm like salivating. I'm like, yeah, let's go. So but our values can change over time. And so that's just one example of like recognizing where like people start to change how they view exercise, which then changes the response. Does that make sense?
Yeah, are you saying that you generally think, and maybe this was the wrong word, but essentially that the mind leads the way, or am I misunderstanding that?
No, you're right, but also the environment leads the mind. So
Okay.
it's a feedback loop that's kind of like a positive feedback loop and maybe even a negative feedback loop at times. So the environment that you're placed in can change how you do things and how you respond to things, just like your mind can change your perception of the environment.
Interesting. Would the environment trigger like a system one type of a subconscious response, which is then met with a system two conscious response to what system one has done? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, it actually can. That's like a lot of the work from John Sarno, in the psychosomatic medicine world. Absolutely, and I draw on a lot of his research and a lot of that literature in terms of how I think about assessing humans for high levels of fitness.
So if you were going to, I wanted to see if we can break this down a little bit. How do you help people identify those either triggers or environmental constraints or experiences that lead to these reactions? How do you help them see that?
It depends. I mean, a lot of the times people don't even realize that that's the case. So I always start with the basics of assessment. So I look at movement, energy systems, I look at biomechanics, structural balance even. And then from there, I go to the next level, which is looking at physiology. So I do a lot of in-depth physiology testing. So my intake form typically is like 10 pages, and it goes pretty in-depth. And then from there, as needed, I'll look at anything from urine hormone testing, blood testing, stool tests for whatever could be in the gut. I've even looked at like heavy metal testing to see where somebody might sit within that. Because at the end of the day, like movement is the basis. It's fitness, and if you're getting more fit, then we're doing something right. But I'm also going to look at all the underlying physiology stuff, and then after that, we go into that like psychosomatic, mental, emotional side of things. And because it's a top-down or bottom-up approach, you can't really take one method or like one way with every human. So the top-down approach should be like, hey, you're emotionally taxed right now because you're going through finals in undergrad or grad school, or you're like defending your thesis for your PhD. There's a lot of stress there. That stress level will change your physiology. But at the same time, let's say you're one of my military guys and you just came back from a deployment. You had to eat local food with the people in Afghanistan or Syria or wherever you're going. You got a parasite. That's going to change your physiology and gut health in modern day psychology is even being looked at for like mental emotional health disorders. So how you feel can be dictated from like the mental emotional stress top down, so brain and down, or it could be because of the gut health, the liver health, the whatever health, and that's the bottom up approach. So I typically take a bottom up approach while being mindful of a top down, just because people typically don't come to me because they want the top down approach from the get go.
I was going to ask you how you identify the right times to start to have that conversation with folks.
Yeah, well, the right time is when the client realizes typically that like everything else we're doing isn't working, if that's the case. So, I'll have clients where I've had them for 3, 4, 5 years now, and it's like, hey, we've done everything we could. You're still not quite where you want to be. And then I let them take the lead. I'm like, well, what do you think is next? And I let clients kind of dictate that a bit. The research shows us, especially if you look at like the pain science world, like if I give you options and like you have decision-making capability in how I treat you, you're going to have a better outcome. So I love to give my clients a chance to actually have decision-making capabilities within the design of the program. And then that also lets them know, like, hey, like we've done everything you thought you needed to do. We've done everything I thought we needed to do based on my academic and professional experiences. I don't think it's a physiological thing. I think we got something, at a deeper level. And then I love to give books out. So I like sprinkle book readings. I try to read 1 book a week at the very least. So I'm constantly reading. I'm a voracious bibliophile. And because of that, I'll just say, hey, I think you should read this book. It might be good for you. And I have a client, actually, his name is Joe. He was pretty convinced he had a pathomechanical issue with his shoulder. And I was...
Sorry, can you explain what pathomechanical is?
He had like a pathological biomechanical problem.
Okay.
Like he had like an impingement that was like very bad for the shoulder, and he was like, that's why my shoulder hurts. And I was like, I don't think it's that, brother. I really don't. So I gave him a book to read, and I was like, hey, read this book. Man, it may mean something, it may not. We had a consult call today, and he was like, I'm convinced that there's nothing wrong with my shoulder. I'm freaking stressed. I was like,
yeah, there we're going.
So now the dialogue is open, and he's like, oh man, I'm learning all these things now. So my approach, I guess, if anything, you can call it like I'm more of a mentor and a guide to all of my clients versus like a dictator.
Gotcha.
So I want my clients to learn. I want them to grow. I want my clients to essentially like not need me at some point. I want to work myself out of a job. There's tens of thousands of people out there that need help. I can't help tens of thousands of people at once. So I'd rather help somebody and then like, hey, it's been 2, 3, 5 years. Like, you're good on your own. Like, by all means, like, here's my cell phone. Text me whenever you need me. But like, I don't really need to teach you how to eat. You know how to eat. You know how food should look. You have great intuitive eating. You're aware of all of the signals of hunger and satiety, and you understand mental, emotional stress. You understand your whys, your values. You also understand how to move. I got nothing left to teach you. Boom, spread your wings and fly. And then the next client comes in. So I really try to work myself out of a job, and that's probably the approach I take with like 98% of my clients. Some people will never be able to not work with me in that sense because they always need that consultant because they're always trying to stay at the top of their game. Like my operators, I work with a lot of tier 1 and tier 2 spec ops and special forces people or whatever. They're never going to be able to, constantly handle that stuff on their own. Like they need a consultant in that case. So I look at myself as more of like a mentor or even a consultant in fitness.
Gotcha. So let's shift gears for a minute here. How did you originally, if you could put some sort of, the inciting incident into this thing, what got you so interested to dig at the level that you're digging into this game of fitness and health?
Oh man.
It goes back a bit.
Yeah, so I mean I've always been really fascinated with resiliency. Like, what the hell is resiliency? How do we define it? How do we train it? How do we coach it?
I found that it's hard to even find a great definition just generally about it. It's just all over the place.
So I have found my definition, my working definition today. I reserve the right to change my mind in a year as I learn and grow. But as of right now, resiliency is the ability to do whatever the hell you want while minimizing the adverse consequences. So you want to go be, a Green Beret. There's adverse consequences and there's health risks involved there. But that's what you want to do. I'm going to train you to be as physically fit for that job as possible while minimizing all the potential adverse consequences, such as toxicity because you're inhaling helicopter fuel all day, lead toxicity because you're touching thousands of pieces of lead in training, sleep deprivation causing all sorts of other issues, blah, blah, blah. So my job is to basically make you as resilient as possible so you can do that job for 20 years or longer and then get out and not have 100% disability, to get out and be able to go live life and continue to live life and have fun and not be all broken. So that to me is more about resiliency. And that also has a huge mental emotional component, teaching people how to view things differently, which is a skill and an art in and of itself. That's kind of how I would look at what resiliency is today. And I was fascinated with it for years because I was told, because I studied kinesiology in undergrad, went to grad school, the entire time I was told, like, oh, if you don't move this way, you're going to get hurt. That's the FMS world.
Would that conversation, at least in your mind, have started way back in the day through martial arts or soccer or any of that? Or is that more just kind of, it was in my head, I didn't know where it was, but...
I think for me, I've always had this fascination with pain, especially because of my martial arts background. I had no way to explain it, but I knew that pain was an experience, and it wasn't just a signal. It's like if I stub my toe, there's a signal that's going to go from my toe to my brain, and my brain's going to interpret that signal and then send another signal down being like, your toe hurts. But what if I just won the jackpot, $500 million, and I stubbed my toe walking up the steps to get that giant check? Does my toe really hurt that bad? It's kind of like, ow, whatever, I'm going to buy a new toe.
Right. I'm going up these stairs right now.
Yeah, but like, what if I just have my house foreclosed on, and as I walk out of the house, I stub my toe? Holy shit, that's the worst pain you can imagine. So pain is this experience thing, and martial arts kind of taught me that, where it's like, you're going to get punched in the face. You're going to get your nose broken. But, you're kind of in the middle of something. So you can't really lay down and be like, oh, my nose, oh, it hurts. It's kind of like, yep, okay, I registered that I just got punched. It doesn't feel great, but whatever. I'll deal with the aftermath later. And I remember one of my friends, Ed Song, he shattered his femur. Shattered it mountain biking. Like, fell off the bike, leg got caught between two rocks.
Oh, no.
His body kept going, leg
no.
stayed there. So I told him like 2 years after that, I was like, dude, like, pain is like an experience. Like, if you could just accept the fact that you're in pain and recognize that it's not going to change anytime soon, your experience of the painful moment will change, and it won't hurt as much. He was like, you've never shattered your leg ever, Michael. And I was like, nope, I haven't. Knock on wood. A couple years later, he's snowboarding, and he shatters the same femur. Shatters it, right? And he actually was in another country. He was in South Korea. And they wouldn't give him morphine. They're like, you have strong spirit. You don't need morphine. He was like, no, I need morphine. And he basically remembered what I had told him. And he came back to the States, and he was like, you're right. I just told myself that it's going to hurt no matter what. I'm stuck here. It's going to be better eventually. And when he actually accepted, when he truly accepted his position, he said it kind of like dulled out. It still hurt, but it was different.
Does that become almost meditative in terms of, gosh, I'm not going to say this effectively, but almost like a consciousness level when you start to put those things on the table and become very aware of, my femur shattered, it's really hurting, it's going to continue to hurt. Does that act in and of itself start the dulling process? Is it meditative, or?
I don't know how to answer that question from like a scientific perspective. One's perception of something can absolutely change, what's happening, right? Like, let's say you're used to LA traffic, and your perception of traffic jams is like LA traffic, and then you come to Scottsdale and it's like 4 p.m. The perception of the annoyance of traffic jams here in Scottsdale is different to you than it is to me because of the environment in which your mind has been placed in. So I think by challenging mindset stuff, stoicism, for example, like learning how to like dig into that stuff, it'll absolutely change how one might perceive anything that they're going through.
How much of perception do you find to be experiential?
Oh, a lot.
Yeah.
I think that's huge. Like, nobody's going to be, like, wisdom doesn't happen to an 18-year-old.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think that's huge. I think a lot of it's experience. It's exposure for sure. But I think that's like that top-tier thing that sometimes can't even be trained or coached. I talked to one of my dev group guys who's a SEAL Team 6 dude, and I asked him, I was like, what makes you different, like, mindset-wise, than, like, the guys that are SEALs, but they're not, at that level? Or like the tier 2 guys, and he was like, I think it's just mindset. And I asked him, like, can you train that? Can you teach that? You're just kind of born that way. So I think there's a point in time where like you're just wired a certain way upstairs, and it's just like something up here is different, and there's no coaching that.
Let me bring that all the way back to the beginning of the conversation where you were discussing how you help your folks.
Yeah.
And if we go to that last comment about you're born with it and couple it with the, not evolution, but the changes that people go through, how do you merge the two? So how do you, I know it's a big question, and we probably don't have actually enough time to get to it, but how do you take somebody's wiring, hard-coded, and merge that with their experiences to help them optimize health, fitness, fulfillment?
Actually, I don't think I fully understand what you're trying to ask.
So if the SEAL Team 6 guy has made a statement that seems intrinsically true, meaning a lot of people are born with this kind of different mindset and different maybe capability mentally, and that's hard-coded. And then they have this entire childhood experience growing up with these different experiences. How do you reconcile those two things to help them then move forward in wherever they want to go? So for example, let's say that somebody wants to be SEAL Team 6 and they don't have all of that mindset. Maybe they've got half of it that you can tangibly see. How do you help them move forward? Or do you say to them, hey, maybe you just don't have this mindset? And I know I'm just bastardizing that statement, but...
Yeah, actually, it's a great question, and I don't. I worry about the physicality of everything, building out resiliency so that they have the central nervous system, the peripheral nervous system function as well, and the enteric nervous system function to allow them to survive that. I have people that I refer to that, like actual operators who are in those organizations that are happy to talk with someone. So, for example, I could send like one of my Green Beret candidates, a selection candidate, I should say, who wanted to go through SFAS. Well, he was an officer, and I said, okay, like, I can't tell you what it's like to be a Green Beret because I've never been one, but let me send you to a guy that is one, and he can mentor you because you're both officers, and he can begin to help cultivate that side. Because that's a job-specific side I just can't teach. So I look at the physical, and then I'll say, hey, I got this like other guy he is where you want to be. Talk to him. And that way they can begin to build it out. And then I'll give book readings and we'll have conversations. Like, I don't mind having conversations, but I can't ever tell somebody what it's like to have to go through buds and then do that and then eventually get over to the tier 1 side of it. I've never done that. Yeah. But I am an expert in building out resiliency. Like physical resiliency, 100% the expert on that one.
Yeah, I think that's a brilliant comment. I think that there are so many coaches out there that try to be the full one-stop shop for very, very niche audience people, and that can get them into some trouble down the road because they don't have the experience set to understand what it's like to be in the moment.
Yeah, but I think at the same time, it's very dangerous because I know a lot of people who are former operators that think they're qualified to be coaches to coach others to become operators. That's not the case because I've spent well over a decade studying fitness and resiliency. I have 25,000 hours of exposure in-person coaching. I've written 25,000+ programs at this point. I mean, you don't get that type of education by just being an operator. Like I talked to one guy. He's a former operator and he's retired now. And he was like, "You just got to figure shit out, man." Like, no, dude. Like, how do you figure shit out? Like, you didn't go to school for 10 years to figure this out. Like, no. Like, you got to hire a consultant. Like, business managers and business leaders, CEOs of major corporations hire consultants because they recognize, like, I don't know everything. I have consultants that I work with. So I look at it as like, I see a lot of like retired operators or just guys that only spent, maybe 10 years in the military, and they're out there creating these like tactical training companies. We're going to teach you how to like train for selection, but it's like, nope, that's going to break people off. 100% of my clients that have gone through those types of programs got broken off and got better once they came over to me because we looked at them as a human, not just as like this giant like funnel of humans trying to do the same thing. It's like I worked with a lacrosse athlete years ago, and his lacrosse coach said, "Dude, just to get good at lacrosse, go play basketball in the off season. You'll be good. That's what you did to get good, but that's not what he needs to get good." And everyone is so vastly different. And I remember standing in front of a room of a ton of operators, and I asked every single one of them, I was like, well, how did you get here? Every single one had a very different athletic background, a very different childhood, a very different story, and they all trained very differently to survive the selection process and then to survive the schooling and all that. Not a single one had the exact same method.
Quick side note, from that conversation, did you find that there were consistencies with those folks?
There were very, very awesome commonalities.
Yeah.
So Charles Poliquin, when he was alive, he told me basically to look for the common successes.
Mm-hmm.
So his example was, look at what Russia's doing and look what the Chinese are doing. Stop doing the uniqueness. Find the thing that they're doing that's the same and replicate that. And so after talking to dozens of different operators in that room, I was like, all right, like there's some commonalities here. I want to figure out where those are and create that. And the commonality was you have to have a huge aerobic base. And you've got to have an aerobic base in multiple systems or multiple ways. So like you can't just be a great runner, but you have to have an aerobic base that allows your nervous system to be aerobic while moving with the pack. You have to have a lot of trunk stiffness because you've got to be able to rock and run with kit and all that, which requires trunk stiffness. And then you got to also be able to prioritize sleep.
Interesting.
Most people think because selection and all these other endeavors are horribly hard, like they're very tough endeavors, and you don't get to sleep 8 hours a night, you don't get perfect meals. People think, well, if that's what selection's like, I should train like that. No, what you do is you train to get great adaptations.
Yeah, and go through that process.
Yeah, and then you build up all the fitness and resiliency and get great adaptations, and then 6 weeks prior, let's put you through a small little tester that may look like selection. 3 days of just no sleep or 5 days of no sleep and constantly training and exercising and give your mind a taste of it so you just know, yep, that's going to be shitty. And then back out, recover, and then just train normal until it's go time.
Mm-hmm.
Most people don't get that. And I think that's kind of why there's a lot of like injuries that are in that tactical training world, because operators and operator hopefuls, they think that they just have to kick their
burning the system down.
Yeah, they got to kick themselves in the butt all the time.
Yeah. Okay. We could go so far into that, which would be really fun. We'll have to do that on another call.
Sure.
Not a call, video interview. The last question I want to ask you is, what are you currently really interested in investigating within health and fitness or wellness?
Yeah, I'm super keen on just resiliency. So I order labs on tons of clients. I look at labs and I like to see what is creating the resiliency. Like I've seen people get like much better labs, like we've improved all this physiological stuff, and they got worse. Why? And then I've seen other people get better, and then they markedly got stronger. Like, oh my gosh, 50-pound PRs in 8 weeks. Like, holy crap. So I'm trying to figure out where that resiliency comes from. And so I'm looking at everything from like functional biochemistry to psychology, different schools of thought and philosophy, biomechanics always. That's what I studied for so long. I'm just trying to figure out how to make people perform at their very best while maintaining high levels of resilience so they can continue to do what they want to do without getting broken, basically. That's where all of my investigations are leading. And I'm currently reading a lot of books on philosophy. I'm rereading all of David Deer's work, The Way of the Superior Man, It's a Guy thing, all of his books and all of his work. Looking deeply into the pain science world. Pain science, I think it's a deep topic, but the biopsychosocial model of pain, there's so many amazing carryovers to high levels of performance and resiliency. And I've studied pain for years now, and looking at and I've worked with a lot of people in chronic pain, and looking at what gets people out of chronic pain is the same thing that gets high-level athletes to perform at their very best. And there's a lot of commonalities there that I'm trying to draw out and figure out kind of how can I use that in a remote coaching model to make it more accessible for people. So right now I'm just trying to figure out resiliency and just trying to see where it kind of comes from. And then within myself as well, it's always trying to figure out where it comes from within me. My own values and my own fitness. So I like to test a lot of stuff out, like hiking in Norway, for example. Didn't sleep a lot, was hiking a lot, lost 15 pounds while I was there, climbing Mount Fuji next weekend. just trying to put like the things that I want my clients to do, like I'm putting those things to the test as well personally.
Well, you better recover this week according to what we just talked about.
Yeah, my room is pitch black.
There you go. Yeah, Norway never gets dark, man. I just experienced that too.
Gosh, it's 1 a.m. and the sun is shining in my eyes, and I'm like, how do people sleep here? And the Airbnb, there were no blackout
Right,
curtains.
I
And
know.
I'm like,
But it's not any darker, guys.
yeah, it was horrible. Man. It was a fun time. But yeah, that's what I'm doing right now.
Cool. Michael, thanks so much for coming on. Guys, I really appreciate the time, and we'll see you on the next one.
Thanks.